Hi, Marissa.
Yeah. Hi, nice to see you too. So everybody, I'm so happy to be having this conversation with Maitreya Wolf, my guest today. And Maitreya and I have a beautiful conversation that we're going to jump into. I'm sure it's going to unfold in the most magical ways. Thank you for saying yes to doing this live. And why don't you start by telling us a little bit more about yourself and how you got to be where you are today? Start part of your healing journey, if you'll share.
Okay. I want to put it out first that if at any point in time my internet becomes untenable, just tell me right away, and we'll see what we can do about that. Um, so,
Okay.
hello, everyone. My name is Maitreya Wolf. I have an evolutionary mentoring practice called Soul Power Mentoring, in which I help people transform pain into power so that they can embody and give their gifts in the most integrated way possible in this amazing time. And I came to this work through the course of my own journey. I've been, um, my own journey my whole life, and the whole thread that I've ever connected to of my lives. But, I went through trauma many years ago that catalyzed an enormous orientational shift in my life and sent me into what I first understood as a dark night of the soul. And then many years later, I came into contact with the concept of initiation. And the concept of initiation became really central to how I navigate my life. And as I've grown in
Mhm.
this process, it's become really central to how I teach and how I help others to navigate their lives. So I come to where I am today through the course of living my own experience really deeply and being really devoted to the path of soul and the path of evolution and metamorphosis for the best for the best out for myself and for my participation in the life of the world. So that's a place to start.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I love it. And I love this concept, Maitreya, of initiation. And maybe you could give a little primer as to what initiation means, how that's different from our traumas that we experience, how we can transmute the suffering in our lives. Would you please dive a little deeper into that concept?
Of course. Well, that invitation is a broad swath into this whole world. So I'll start with what is commonly a beginning point. So initiation is an understanding that is dressed on top of what I call an old power, one of the fundamental aspects of the universal being, which is unbidden transformation, or transformation at the deepest level in a life. And initiation was how intact culture made intentional relationship with the fundamental power of transformation at the quantum level so that it could be harnessed and um, what's the word, orchestrated in a way that would lead you through that phase of transformation in a way that actually drew forth your greater capacity for participating in the dance of life. So, fast forward to wherever we all are as Westerners, and especially as modern American Westerners, and we are, for the most part, no longer living in a culture at this time, and a lot of cultural components that make a human congregation culture have been taken out, and one of them is initiation. So we go through these massive transformations in our life. And, you know, one of the basic examples is in intact cultures, when you move into puberty as a young one, it is recognized that you are moving from being a child to being a child maker, as either as a woman or a man. You're moving from being a child and being carried by the culture to being a child maker, somebody who carries the culture. And that this transition between states is extraordinary magnitude and needs containment so that it can happen well, so that you can make that move between states in a way that is coherent and empowering and roots you in to the greater possibilities of your own human experience and to your place in the culture as a life tender for the duration of your time until, you know, one of the big next ones is that you pass into elderhood. So we still in our lives go through those changes. We still go through puberty. We still go through enormous, impactful events of other kinds. We still go through those things, but now we don't have the initiatory context held by culture. We don't have that broader lens that deepens our capacity for relating to it, our experience in a life-giving way. And we don't have witness, the witness of the culture that understands that you have been through something of profound magnitude and you are different now. So we're kind of with that old power of transformation, we're a little bit adrift, and we have to find our own way to make meaning with it. So to come back to the question that is about the difference between initiation and trauma, as a person living outside of a cultural context, as a person who's living in a social society context, the difference between an impactful event landing as a debilitating or disorganizing or deranging trauma and it landing as a potential for deeper healing, awakening, and empowerment is orientation, our orientation.
Thank you. Thank you for all of that. It's such a beautiful thing, and so true that we've lost touch with the art of ceremony in our culture, that we don't honor young women as they enter into, or we don't honor young men as they're making their transition into becoming young men. I see this especially in our men. I think as women, we're more apt to gather and to reflect and to talk, but I feel like especially with men, like it's a feeling of being lost, I imagine, with our guys. And you know, you and I had talked also about the importance of having a witness, how that can make the biggest difference in it being an initiatory process or a traumatic event if we feel like we're left all alone in this. And I'm wondering, can you tell us a little bit more about how you lead someone through this process, or how would, in what capacity would someone come to you and work with you?
People come to me in all different of transformation. And when somebody comes to me in a place of moving from one phase of being to another, my deepest inquiry with them is, what are you moving out of in your life? And what are you moving into in your life? And how is that rooted in soul? And how is that rooted in earth? And how does that move you into what I refer to as a greater order of beauty? So, for instance, I've had multiple clients come into my keeping who I've worked with many women going through divorce. So, you know, these are women who have lived a life of partnership, potentially motherhood, being really invested in and defined by their role in the marriage or the family. And now they're stepping out of that setting for whatever reason. And they're stepping into this vast unknown of like, if I'm not a wife and a mother primarily, who am I? What am I here for? What am I all about? What do I do with my time? And it's such a dynamic undertaking that to step out of the context that has created a container for your life in which like you don't have to worry about what your days need. You don't have to worry about what your task is. You don't have to worry about what your responsibilities are because the context holds that in place for you. And then you get to this place where you're like, I don't want that context anymore for a reason. But oh my God, that kind of takes understanding of my identity and my place in the world away from me. So in that sense, we start into just the prayer. What is your prayer for your life? And a lot of times, like, you have to spend a good deal of time getting to that prayer for your life. What is your prayer for your life? Because a lot of people go through their lives and like one thing comes after the next, after the next, after the next. And they're not necessarily making these deeply rooted soul powered changes. They're making the kind of the choice that's in front of them. You know, the choice that's in front of them and the choice that they should make, the choice that they think is best to make, whatever it is. And it gets to where suddenly it opens and it's like an agent you. An agency. What I do is I get people to turn within, to take their attention out of all of the things in the world that are pulling on them, to take their attention out of that, turn it inside towards themselves and turn it inwards towards the earth, literally towards the earth and towards the soul within them, and to start learning at that deeper level, and then learning how to respond at that deeper level.
Maitreya, I'm having a bit of a hard time. You're coming through a little splotchy in audio. What can you repeat what the thing was that when someone turns that energy inside, like what is that they're finding or looking for?
When I have it, how's this for audio? Does that sound better? Does it sound
Yes,
better
I think
for
so.
audio? Okay. Okay. So one of the things that is consistent in my work is that I am teaching people how to turn their attention inside, how to take their attention out of everything that grasps at them from the outer world, turn it within, and turn it down towards the earth and the soul, so that they can start listening to their own deeper truth and to their truth as it's nested into the mystery. Because when you start accessing that deeper level of presence with the the supernatural aspect of your being, then you start to relate to the process of your life in a different way. It nests you into the body of life in a different way, and it offers a deeper nourishment for your experience.
I love that. I love that so much. In fact, I just finished up a hypnotherapy appointment with a client, and she said, she must have said, I don't know, probably 50 times. And,
Right.
that was the medicine, was turning inside and saying, I do know, I do trust myself, I do know, like encouraging her to go deeper and to really trust herself. And I think something interesting to talk about is this disconnection that we feel as Westerners from our spirituality, from our physical bodies. Sometimes people don't even know that they're not living their best life, that they're not feeling as good as they could be feeling. We're so disconnected. We're so encouraged to just push through and to keep going and to remain in this matrix, as you know. What are some of your techniques to helping people kind of like drop in? And I know some of your writings, Maitreya creates beautiful pieces on Facebook. I've read your writing. It's wonderful and beautiful and so just full of meaning and depth. And I'm just wondering if you can speak on that topic of this total disconnection from the essence of our being as Westerners.
Yes, yes, I can. This is something I think about a lot. And it is so multifaceted. So I am a person of European descent. I have a pretty pan-European background, and I am keenly aware of the annihilation of the earth-based cultures of Europe through the Inquisition in the Middle Ages, and how that instilled a neurotic psychosis in the psyche of the descendants of that experience, and how it instilled a neurotic psychosis in the body of the world, because anybody's trauma is a part of the collective field that we all live inside of. So there's this enormous, unacknowledged, undigested, unrecognized, staggering trauma in the body of the European diaspora, of which I am a descendant. And in the course of my own life, dealing with, at first being with what a friend of mine finally named a reluctant incarnate, somebody who like doesn't really want to be here in the world, you know, dealing with that and dealing with the way that that pulls on the unfolding of my life, and tracking the threads of that, like, why don't I want to be here? Part of it is that because I'm a descendant of the European diaspora, there's a fundamental severance in my root system that I have not yet found a way to legitimately and sustainably repair through belonging to place, to world, to people, in the way that we could when we had indigenous roots, or even just like when we actually unfolded the lineage of our lives in a particular geographic area, even if we weren't as far as being indigenous, you know, actively animistically engaged with the landscape and all this other stuff, you know. And there's I see it across the board that there is such a normalization of that neurotic psychosis of dislocation and disconnection from earth and from place and from context, like cultural context. It's so normalized that it's like a fish in a river of toxic waste. The fish just doesn't even know, because the fish was born there. The fish was raised there. The fish was taught all its life, this is normal. This is how things are. This is what things are. And then the fish at some point, maybe it will realize it if it ever makes access to fresh water. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll live its whole life being like, yeah, these tumors on my eye are normal. This is how all fish are, isn't it? You know, and we're in that same place as a society, you know, and especially like I'm I'm really adamant that we don't call American life culture, because it's not culture. Consumerism is not culture. It's society. It's society. It's just a social order. It's a civilization, and that's it. There's no cultural coherence, which makes a space for soul. You know, like that's the piece.
Mm.
Making space for soul and making space for earth in the unfolding of your human life. And as the context and the relevance for your human life. So, you know, never
Mm.
before, to the degree that we're experiencing now, have people lived such an abstracted life where they're not in contact with the earth, where they're not in a cycle of prayer or ceremony, when there's like, we're just like floating in this totally conceptual world
Mm.
in the West in particular. I can't speak about other
Mhm.
cultures so much, but in the society of the West in particular, we're floating in this very disembodied, disconnected from the earth realm. And, you know, I think about it a lot in intact cultural contexts. It would be understood that if the collective is hurting, the individual is going to be hurting. If the earth is hurting, the
Mhm.
individual is going to be feeling that. But now we live in this place where people come to me like debilitated with grief, debilitated with existential anxiety, debilitated or overwhelmed
Mhm.
with sorrow and uncertainty. And they're like, I don't know what's wrong with me. And I'm like, well, let's just start at the beginning. Like we're living in the implosion of society and living in the sixth
Mhm.
of the world. We're living in extreme environment peril. Like, I'm surprised you're doing as well as you're doing. And I want to celebrate that and find ways to
Mm.
power that, actually participate in this bigger picture of our unfolding story here with the fullness of your power. Like that's what initiation is for me. It's like, you know, if we get handed a situation that is beyond our capacity to navigate with grace or to meet, I mean, this is one of the definitions of trauma is something happens that you can't actually process, you can't actually integrate it, you can't actually meet it, and part of you
Mhm.
is off to sequester the overwhelm and to sequester the feelings that you
Mm.
can't process, you know. And through what I call cultivating initiatory consciousness, you deal with the impact of the thing, you deal with the reality of the thing, but you deal with it in this way of an ongoing question of what greater capacity within me can respond to this in a life-giving way.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
which for me in a really basic way comes down to like, how do I get my soul how do I get my soul activated to step forward as my animating force right now so that I can
Mm.
meet the magnitude of this moment? Because, you know, in terms of kind of our global situation, like we're in pretty dire straits on on a
Yeah.
global level. Like all the timelines are converging and collapsing at once. And as many of us know, this is an extraordinary opportunity, but a lot of people don't know it's an extraordinary opportunity.
Mhm. Mhm.
They're just scared, rightfully so. They're just scared. And so they suppress the fear so they can carry on day to day to day. And I'm actually, in my work with people, I'm actually like, no, let's actually open up that fear,
Yeah.
because that
Mm.
fear is actually the path to power if you can walk through it without getting
Mm.
caught in it.
Mm.
And this is a whole like skill and way of being in your life that is really, really unusual, really unusual. But once you can cultivate that skill, once you can cultivate initiatory consciousness and you can relate to your experience through the lens of how do, how do I open, or what to say, what greater capacity is being called forth from
Mhm.
right now? And how can I encourage, how can I deepen and open so that that greater capacity is able to step forward and to respond, and not just momentarily, not just situationally, but so that that greater capacity then becomes your foundation. It becomes the way that you're moving in the world. It becomes the way that you're navigating your life.
Mm. So powerful. So powerful, and typically not the way that we move through life, right? Things happen, we take on a victim mentality. We don't transmute that suffering typically into empowerment, like you're saying. And I
Right.
think that that distinction between traumatic events and seeing them as initiatory rather than traumatic is key to helping people become more empowered in their beings. And you know, I feel like this is a new subject, a new emergence. You're onto something like very, very new that people might not have considered before. Um, and I would love to talk a little bit more about the reluctant incarnate. That really spoke to me because I have feelings, and I've felt this since I was a child, of like really not belonging, not knowing who I am, where I am. There's no talk in my family of these are our roots. This is where we come from. It's like once we landed on American soil, we're no longer anybody but Americans. And you're so right that like that's not a culture. That's not necessarily a culture. It's a paradigm. And yeah, I'm sure you felt must feel the same way about like I don't feel like I belong here on Earth. And I think there's many of us in this boat. Maybe you can speak on that a little more.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this would be a moment of pretty powerful vulnerability. But so, to anyone watching, just contextualize this a little bit. Marissa and I met through a program that we're both doing. It's excellent, excellent program. And in this program, one of the things we can do is a session with this master NLP practitioner. So I was in my session with Michelle, and we got to this core wound that I had accessed before, but I'd only ever accessed it informationally. You know, I'd never really accessed it emotionally. I'd gotten to the place where I'm like, oh yeah, look at that, that's there. I bet that matters. But you know, I'm like dealing with other stuff right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like you can only get to what you can get to in a moment.
Yeah.
And I've definitely looked at that a few times and been like, oh yeah, that's probably significant. I'm sure that's going to come up for
Mm-hmm.
that's going to come up for air pretty soon. And then it did in the last few weeks, and it really knocked me sideways to realize that when I was 4, and I remember the moment really clearly. When I was 4, I was sitting on my bed in my room, and I don't know what had happened. I think it was around the time that I fully understood that my father had abandoned me.
Mm.
But I was sitting in my room. I was in a tremendous amount of pain. I was profoundly lonely. I felt like I had no one to turn to and nowhere to turn. And I had this sense that human life was this way and it was always going to be this way. And there was a really clear moment where I was like, I don't want to do this. Yeah, 4 years old, right? 4 years old, 4 years old, little baby. You should be happy as fuck.
Little. Yeah.
Yeah, little baby. You should
Baby.
be happy as fuck just thinking about like kittens and dolls and who knows what. But I'm sitting there on my bed like, I don't want to do this. And I remember it so clearly. And then I like made full contact in this session with Michelle. I made this full contact with the emotional reality of that moment, where part of me, it was like the old soul that I am and the young child that I was were both there at the same moment, just like, oh God, I don't want to do this. It's always going to be this way and I don't want to do it.
Mm.
And you know, I was 4, so like what's my possibility? I withdrew.
Mm.
I withdrew energetically. I withdrew from my life. And I recognized at this point 40 years later, I recognize at this point, I'm like, holy shit. It's one of those moments when you go in there, it's like the psychedelic experience. You go in there and you see something and it like fractals into like all of the ways this tones your life. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, holy shit, this has been like a fundamental orientation mode to my
Wow.
entire life.
Huge.
This idea that I don't want to be here. So, it was about a year ago, I had a young woman come to me for some work, and her father was dying, and she was, doing her best to find a life-giving path through it, and we were doing the soul work, and she said that phrase. She said something about reconciling with the reality of being a reluctant incarnate. And I was like,
Ooh.
a reluctant incarnate? She's like, yeah, somebody who doesn't want to be here. I was like, oh, you have a word for that.
It's great.
Okay, that's awesome. So, yeah. And I feel like that shows up across the board so much because the earth is so ripped up by violence and madness and trauma and insanity and banality and just like so many people in cultural contexts and outside of cultural contexts, and like so many people across the board are just like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. Like I've lived in the Southwest a lot in my life. I don't at this point, but I lived in the Southwest a lot in my life and met tons of Native kids and adults and elders. Not the elders so much. The elders are in better stead lots of times, but the kids in particular are just like, fuck this. What's the point?
Yeah.
This is awful and it's always going to be awful. I don't want to do it. And I'm like, right. And it's that is the thing. Like for me, that's the thing. Like that's where you have to bring in the initiatory understanding, because it gives you meaning for your life. It's like, even if everything's awful, like I went into that trauma when I was 29. I went into that dark night of the soul. And I don't know, like, if I entered into some astrological curse phase or something, but it was like years and years and years of like shit going wrong left, right, and center all the time. Stuff that I could totally take responsibility for, stuff that I was like, I had no power over that at all. Stuff that was just like, it was just like one thing after the next, after the next, after the next for years. And I had first the myth of Ishtar, and I call these things the old powers. The old power of Ishtar, the Sumerian goddess of heaven and earth. That myth came through at the beginning of my dark night of the soul. That myth came through and gave me a way to understand the descent to the underworld and to make a life-giving relationship with the process of devastation. And then it was about 8 years later that the myth of Parzival came into my life and brought the concept of initiation into my life. And so I got these two old powers came into my life, and were like, okay, first you need this piece. You get to work with this piece for a while, learn how to be in a descent process in a life-giving way. And then the second piece came in, learn how to harvest the gifts, harvest the medicine, harvest the power, harvest the wisdom from that experience, so that you can come back from it as a resource for life and the world. Because that's the ultimate intention of initiation, is that you go through your ordeal and it forges you into a resource for the world.
Yeah. I love that. Oh, it's so rich and juicy. So much good stuff there. You've helped shift my paradigm you know, with regard to trauma and victimhood as opposed to initiation and empowerment. That's such like a huge distinction. And I'm wondering, just because I've had my own experience with, you know, that feeling of not belonging, and I'm wondering how much of suicide. I know September is like Suicide Prevention Month. It's when a lot of people are giving attention to this subject. But there's a part of me that believes that some suicide is this feeling of being the reluctant incarnate, and maybe helping people understand the distinction there, that life is lacking meaning and purpose, and the world is chaotic, and sometimes that's the reason why people want to leave this earth. I think it's a fascinating concept, and I can kind of like reframe my own suicidality, and you know, going to Peru, drinking ayahuasca, like healing from that whole existential kind of crisis that I had personally. But I just wonder how many people are experiencing this and don't have the words to put to it. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do. I do. And I would say on a unfortunately and beautifully regular basis, I have a conversation with somebody that's like, given everything I understand about life in the cosmos, if you step out, it's not going to change anything, because you're going to have to come back. And you're going to have to come back with everything you didn't do in this life, as well as whatever you have to do in the next one. So I personally believe you're actually going to make your experience much more difficult. But I think it comes back to a lot what we were speaking to in the beginning is it's the feeling of isolation. It's navigating that overwhelm, that fear, the existential terror. Because literally, like, most people have some kind of existential terror right now, and they don't understand it. And it's just like so pervasive. You know, for the most part, you would call this anxiety, right?
Sure.
Like, you got some anxiety, and it's not like situation specific. You just have this general sense of unease. And that is like, yeah, because we're intensely endangered at this point in our lives from every conceivable direction. We're intensely endangered. The world is an intensely endangered phase right now. There's no external safety to really lean on, and you know, which isn't to say there isn't beauty and fabulousness and all the other things. Just the reality of our material experience right now is like, yeah, there's a lot of shit going to be happening in the next 5 to 10 years that a lot of people are not prepared for. And that's nobody's fault. You know, it's nobody's fault that they're not prepared. Like, who can be prepared for the kind of stuff that we might be looking at soon? But, you know, I think about it, a young man I know peripherally recently ended his life because he was a highly sensitive person, and what I have heard termed as a highly sensitive mass processor. So not only did he live in a state of extremely heightened sensitivity to the world, which can be an extraordinary superpower, but is fundamentally a lot to walk with. He also had this component of feeling the pain of the world. And it finally just blew his fuses, and he couldn't do it. And even though his mother loves him, his father loves him, his friends love him, even though there was that love there for him, he couldn't actually do it. He couldn't actually stay with it. And, you know, the initiatory lens gives you a way to relate to that kind of pain and fear and overwhelm through the inquiry of what is the possibility for this to make me greater as a being? And not greater like better, but greater as in broader
Yeah.
energetically, more broad, more potent, more empowered, more integrated, so that I can actually be this sensitive without drowning in it,
Oh,
so that I can
yeah.
actually feel this much without drowning in it. You know, the
I think
initial
there, I was going to say, I think there are a lot of people who feel like they're drowning right now. I feel
yeah,
like this medicine that you're offering is very timely and very important for what's happening right now in the world. And I like that you brought in like the idea of the highly sensitive person. I think this probably hits those people the hardest. Myself being one of those, I think you
yeah, me
are
too.
too, Maitreya.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
being highly sensitive and just trying to hold it all, like right, trying to hold all of um, this just like multifaceted ways that we can all be in the world. And I love that idea of bringing it back to like having a sense of purpose. Like what is our truly like what is our purpose in this world? And I'm wondering, Maitreya, if we can circle back around to this concept of indigenous roots, even as those of us with European descent. Um, we were at one time indigenous people of some land. Do you have any words of wisdom for anyone listening to this replay live? Any words of wisdom for those of us who are of European descent and trying to feel rooted in this land, in this stolen land? It's so complex and so complicated. I'm just wondering if you have any advice for people.
make your relationship with the earth. That's what indigenosity is to be in a deep reciprocal, not conceptual and not aesthetic, but actually deeply reciprocal relationship with the wild and with the fundamental life that nature and the wild are. So, even in the middle of a city, even in the middle of New York, like, make contact with the trees, make contact with the ground, make contact with the wild that is there. And it's a way to start nourishing the roots that have been in root shock. This is what happens to a plant. Like if you take a plant out of its soil, it goes into something called root shock. Literally, you'll see the roots will kind of pull back up towards the plant because they're suddenly like, where am I? I'm in space all of a sudden. So we have an ancestral root shock at this point that's like hundreds of years deep. The Inquisition was hundreds of years ago. And we've been living in that root shock and in that dislocation and in that separation from land and place ever since. So the beginning of reconciliation is to make a connection with the earth, no matter where you are. And, if you're in the middle of a city, like a prescription would be every morning, go outside. Go outside first thing. I'm blessed, a natural place. Now I live in the woods, and every morning I go outside, and the first thing I do is my bare feet are on the ground, and I'm listening to life. And it's of course going to be harder in a city. It's not going to be easy. You're going to hear people. But what you can, before you launch, make and
Maitreya, I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
How's that?
Okay, yeah, you just the video went out unfortunately completely when you were just speaking to that. I'm wondering if you could maybe repeat what you said.
The whole thing?
I heard the part about making contact with the earth.
Make contact
Um,
with the earth. I mean, this is the beginning of healing on more levels than you could ever imagine.
yeah.
It is. Because part of our psychosis and part of the unassuageable anxiety that most people live with has to do with feeling disconnected from the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in whatever way a person can, my first encouragement is always make contact with the earth. In a city, you can always watch the birds, right? Even if you don't have somewhere to put your bare feet on the ground, you can always watch the birds. The birds are always in their natural cycles, even in the middle of a city. You can always watch the birds. You can be with the spiders in your apartment or your house.
I love
You
that.
know, you can make a pilgrimage every morning to that little tree growing out of that little square in the cement. You can make a pilgrimage every morning to that tree. Touch it. That tree's roots are in the earth,
Yeah.
you know? And so we can make contact that way. And that begins to heal us across the board.
I love that. I love that. And you know, since you and I share this mastermind that we're in, that the topic is, you know, using psychedelics in our medicine, in our businesses. How would you say that psychedelics have helped you make connection with the earth or drop more fully into healing? And do they play a part in your offering, how you work with people? I'm just curious.
Yeah, psychedelics totally changed my life. I was 15 when I started using LSD,
Mm-hmm.
and it was amazing. It was homecoming for me. At that point in my life, I felt like, finally, this makes sense. And this is where I want to be. Um, so, there was also a double edged sword there because as a 15-year-old city kid, I grew up in Boston. As a 15-year-old city kid, I didn't have any context for holding what I was
Mm-hmm.
experiencing in the psychedelic realm in an integrated way. So it created a lot of fragmentation, but it also gave me this fundamental, visceral, lived experience of the nature of life, of the reality that life is a continuum of points of energy in relationship, and that every manifest thing in the world is a point of energy in the continuum of creation, and that all of those energies are just together
Mm.
being life. So this absolutely transformed my entire understanding of life and living and meaning and everything else. And I would say the only detriment to it was that it was completely bereft of containment.
Witnessing.
Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
just totally bereft of witnessing. Same as before,
Yeah.
is the witnessing or even the guidance is like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so I've mastered this capacity to like launch out into the quantum realm. I can do that, but coming back into the daily realm, I'm not very good at that, you know.
Mm.
And I'm better at it now, but it took a massive amount of dedicated effort to cultivate that capacity because I was just like, I just want to be out in the quantum. I don't want to
Yeah.
be in the daily. I like it's just that's real. This is not real. That's real, and that's where I want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And like, but you still gotta like eat and sleep and have a
Yeah.
house and buy clothes and whatever. Um, So in my own work, I do a bit of, I incorporate guided journeys into my 9-month program. If
Mhm.
the people I'm working with are in the same area as I am, I include a journey at the beginning, the middle, and the end. One to open the space of our time together. One to what was it say? Clarify where we are on the path in our time
Mhm.
together, and when to complete our time
Love
together.
that.
Yeah. So that's a really juicy and delicious aspect of the 9-month program, which I enjoy tremendously because the three journeys are so different. And
Yeah.
in those journeys, I work with psilocybin.
Mhm.
And I would say that as long as there is some kind of containment to the experience so that it can be integrated into your daily life, it's endlessly supportive to the awakening process, and it's endlessly supportive to the evolutionary process.
Mm.
So,
Mm.
one of the things I learned is I've been down to Peru a number of times and been out into the Amazon to do retreats,
Mhm.
and it was like it was such an eye opener to be like, oh, this is kind of how they tend the temple so that they can live their daily lives better. You know what I mean? Which is such a different thing than the kind of free for all Western approach to it, which is just like, I don't feel great in my life. I'm going to go to the medicine and it's going to sort me out, which is like, no, that's actually not what's going to happen. Medicine's going to show you
Mm.
what might
Mhm.
serve you in sorting it out yourself. But what it comes down to is like, how do you go back to your daily life and live in the wake of that support from the mystery?
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, ooh, such a good topic. Um, and so important. I feel like those journeys for what you're offering is just a part of the ceremony and the celebration and the initiation. So I'm curious if you can let us know how people can get in touch with you and maybe a little bit more about your 9-month program. I'm super curious about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So anybody could find me on Facebook or Instagram. My name is Maitreya Wolf, and my work is called Soul Power Mentoring. My website is soulpowermentoring.com, and maybe there'll be show notes or something, or I can put it in the somewhere. But yeah, so Maitreya Wolf, Facebook, Instagram, Soul Power Mentoring is my website.
Mhm.
And my 9-month program is called the Phoenix Path. And it is for people who have been through a dark night of the soul experience and need support integrating that journey so that they can give the gift that they received from the journey, and so that they can actually live the transformation in an empowered way.
Mm.
So, I mean, my big thing is just to get everybody fully here and fully on board right now, because we are in it as a world. We are in the transformation. And from my perspective, if all of the volunteers, if all of the people, if all of the people who were like, I'll go and help Earth transform,
Mhm.
I'll go, if all of those people get all the way here, come all the way in, and actually bring up their gift and sort out how to live it in a good way, then I believe we could transform this world in the most
Mm.
extraordinary way that has ever been seen. I think we will shift phase from where we've been as a world to something entirely new and profoundly beautiful. And
Mm.
I think we'll have to earn that shift. And I think it's going to depend in large part on the volunteers, whatever you call it, like the light seeds or the light bearers or the way showers or the world crafters or whatever your word for it is. If those people come all the way in really relate to their journey as an initiatory evolutionary process and let it cook them into that greater order of magnitude, and then live and give their gifts on a magical level in this moment, you know, on the magical level, on the practical level, just like, we need you here. We need you here. We need your gifts and we need you here. How can we help you get here? And how can we help you to live your gifts? You know, this is the whole point of my work. And, you know, honestly, for every person, it's different. But the container is 9 months. We meet a few times a month. We do practices. We do deep trauma work. We do initiation work. And then it's all rooted in skills, cultivating the skills to steady your movement through the now, so that as the intensity of the now continues to ramp up, you continue to solidify and become more and more and more empowered in living your path.
Yes. So necessary. So necessary right now.
Yeah.
Maitreya, what a beautiful offering too. Thank you. Thank you for bringing your gifts to the world. And I'm just wondering, as we bring it to a close, how would you encourage people to do the deeper work? This is my motto. I'm always encouraging people to drop in and do the deeper work. Do you have a way that you love to encourage, you know, your clients and your people, your friends, your tribe to drop in and do that deeper work?
Yeah. One of the ways I feel is to really understand that it's going to lead to freedom. You know, because I think a lot of times people avoid, I mean, the word work is so particularly toned. You know, true. It's like, you got to do your work, you got to do your work, you got to do your work. It's like, yeah, you do, but you have to understand that there's a joy to it. You know, I can say, like, I've been through a staggering amount of trauma in my life, like ridiculous amount of trauma. And part of what cultivated the initiatory lens for me, and part of what gave me the fortitude to stay with that, was the understanding through experience that it actually made everything better if I would just show up. If I would just show up and stick with it, even when everything in me is like, fuck this, I'm out of here. If I'll just show up and stick with it, then I get to somewhere better. I get to somewhere better. And honestly, there's no other way to get to that better place than showing up for it, sticking with it, doing what needs to be done. So in that way, it goes from being work to being joy. Even when it sucks, it goes from being work to being joy. Because I know, you know, right now I'm in the midst of like a lot of challenging circumstances. There's a lot that's like not sorted out at this point in my life. Oh, all of this, everything that's wrong right now is a new initiation. Everything that's happening right now is a new initiation, because this deeper aspect of myself that I want to embody is the one who can answer this. And she is the one that this moment is calling for. So my task in this moment is to bring her forward. And I know, because I've been through this so many times in my own life, I know that that's actually an extraordinary opportunity. That actually, there's an extraordinary generosity in it, and that I'm excited about what's possible here, even at the same time that I'm scared and hurting and overwhelmed and under resources and all this stuff. I'm just like, yeah, but I'm excited about it because I know where this goes.
You're willing to step into the fire, step into the unknown. And what a beautiful, courageous thing too. And I think you nailed it. The key is, like, understanding that freedom is on the other side of that, right? Freedom is on the other side of this I want to call it work again, but now I'm reconsidering the word work, but
Challenge.
this
It's on the other side of the
on the other side of the what? The challenge?
challenge. Mm-hmm.
There it is. Yeah. Yeah. And just I love that is so empowering, that just to see it as an initiation, right? Rather than like, poor me, why is this happening to me? That's a complete paradigm shift. And I love
Yeah.
that idea. I love that people can feel empowered with their lives and feel brave and feel like,
Yeah. And
it's like that warrior energy, you know?
yeah. Yeah, it is. And it also comes down to this question, you know, part of how this came into my life, and I was pissed when it happened, I won't lie. Somebody said to me while I was like all up in my victim trip, somebody was like, I was unloading my whole story, poor me, why is this happening to me, all the other things. And it, you know, and at the end I was waiting for like the sympathy to roll in, and she was just like, you know, there's no power in victimhood. And I was like, and it just was, yeah, it was just like, fuck, that is so true. And
Yeah.
and it's just true. It's like there was like a massive amount of stuff happening to me. It was all beyond my control. It all fucked my life up. I didn't, you know, it would have been totally, completely understandable and justifiable to just be like in the victim space. But it's like, it's not going to help. It's not going to do anything good for me. Like you can grieve, you can lament, you can feel the sorrow and the pain, you can feel the why, but that's not where you stay, and that's not where you respond from. You respond from this place of, what greater power in me can rise to this occasion and make this a part of my power.
And a part of your offering too. Like, you're able to show up more fully in the world when you have integrated those lessons and shown up so powerfully.
Yeah.
I'm in awe of you. I'm in awe of you. I love your writing. I love this fierce kind of like goddess warrior energy that you bring to hardship. And from what I understand, you have been through a lot of hardship. So thank you for bringing these lessons and this medicine to the world, Maitreya, and thank you for this beautiful conversation. Thank you for anybody who's tuning in. Give Maitreya a follow and get on her newsletter list. And do you have any closing remarks for us?
Oh yeah, it's just been awesome to be here. It's so nice to spend some time with you, Marissa, and to just explore all this stuff. And just for anybody who's watching, again, my name is Maitreya Wolf, and you can find me on Instagram and Facebook. Just look for Maitreya Wolf. And then you can also find my website, soulpowermentoring.com. You can reach out if you want to connect. You can follow me and all the things. I'm also a musician, so there's music out there to find on the streaming platforms, Maitreya Wolf. And yeah, just understand that you're not alone in your challenge with the now. The now is really fucking challenging, and that challenge is inviting something extraordinary within you to step forward and be the animating force of your life. So don't push yourself, don't beat yourself up, don't like drive yourself into the ground trying to like actualize the possibility, but just recognize that there is something within you that knew this was coming and chose to be here for it, and that something is ready to come to life now. And once it does, it's just going to be extraordinary.
I love it. I love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I resonate with everything you're saying, and I'm so happy we got to have this conversation. Wishing you a beautiful day, goddess. And
thank you so much, Marissa. It's so good to see you.
All right, you too. Okay, everyone, thanks for tuning in, and have a beautiful day.
Okay.
Bye.